I just want to be precise, Prime Minister. You want Israeli airstrikes to blow up Iran's nuclear facilities and its energy facilities, all the oil wells and the oil-related industry that is the main part of the Iranian economy.
That's correct. A few hours ago, let's understand, the largest ballistic attack in the history of the world, 200 ballistic missiles in one attack were shot from one country to our country, from the Islamic Republic of Iran to Israel. The fact that we have brilliant engineers, amazing technology, and very clever people should not protect Iran from our wrath.
What everyone's wondering is, what is the level of response from Israel, from America, in regards to Iran dropping 200 rockets in Israel? And some truly believe that Israel has a plan to attack nuclear sites in Iran. Some believe it's going to be military sites. Some believe it's going to be oil infrastructure. Some believe it's going to be all three. I truly believe that this is the time to attack. You don't wait months, because you have the justification to do it now. Yes, there's a lot of people that are crying, saying, save the Palestinians. But if they are going to attack, this would be the time to do it, okay? Netanyahu is currently addressing the United Nations as we speak, and took over one of the states in America, okay? I can't remember which example you used, but let's say New Mexico. If terrorists came and occupied New Mexico and started sending missiles into Dallas, Texas, how long would you put up with that? And Netanyahu said, we've been putting it up with a year. And he used very strong rhetoric that they're going to do whatever it takes to win and end this conflict. And the only way to stop Iran is with force. And I truly believe that they're going to take this opportunity now that it's justified to respond and retaliate. Because if you don't take care of the source, if you don't take off the head of the snake, you will be continuously fighting this battle. And Israel has been at a standstill, unable to go about their daily lives and business because of the fear of an attack from the Ring of Fire. And Iran has built this Ring of Fire with putting their proxies and military powers in Syria, in Iraq, and in Lebanon, and Hezbollah. I mean, with Hezbollah and Yemen, they're surrounded. And so they're cleaning house right now. And they're using the justification of their children being raped and molested and killed, and them being attacked with missiles from Hezbollah, from Iran, from the Houthi rebels. They don't just seek vengeance, but they seek a way to prevent this from escalating further. And the only way to do that is to destroy Iran. There's no way around it. Period. Okay. And so I'm going to go over some news here. There's several articles, but let's start with this one right here. Israel plans a massive Iran payback with Middle East on edge. Israeli officials staring down all-out regional war will launch a significant retaliation, okay, within the days that could target oil production facilities inside Iran and other strategic sites, okay? Many Israeli officials point to Iran's oil facilities as a likely target, but some say targeted assassinations and taking out Iran's air defense systems also possibilities, okay? Israel said mulling attacks on Iran oil rigs, nuclear sites in response to missile attack. An attack on Iranian oil facilities could devastate the country's economy, and any of the considered response could mark another escalation almost 1 year into the ongoing war that began when the Hamas terror group attacked, okay? Right now, oil prices are trading at $74.36, and Brent crude is $78.28. It's almost back to $80 oil. So this attack, just the idea of Iran's oil going offline, could cause oil prices to go up to $100-something a barrel, and it's already gone up significantly just because of the rumors of it, all right? Goldman Sachs sees $20 upside to oil prices in Iran supply shock. Before I get into some of these other news reports, the thing you have to understand is that obviously war in the Middle East obviously increases oil prices, but what keeps oil prices high is the fundamentals, okay? War without fundamentals, you just have a spike. You have a season of high oil prices. If you remember when Russia entered into Ukraine, invading Ukraine, oil prices spiked and then they came back down. Okay, you had a tremendous amount of recession fears. You had a tremendous amount of the Energy Information Administration grossly overreporting shale production and underreporting demand, and everybody talking about recession because of the increased inflation fears, interest rate hikes, and everything else. Okay, and so now we have geopolitical risk like never before. Netanyahu is currently speaking to the United Nations, and he is saying, listen, we are going to imminently attack, and they have the justification now to do that, okay, with being attacked by Iran. And so it's imminent that they're going to retaliate, or they're going to attack oil facilities. I don't know, but we have fundamentals backing this thing, backing high oil prices. We have geopolitical war backing this thing, increasing oil prices, and also a stronger economy. The American oil usage demand has increased, okay? And with the Jerome Powell decreasing interest rates, that's going to spur on the markets. And so there's a lot of articles I want to go over real quick. U.S. shale hits the snooze button. So bottom line, they're looking at the oil output of shale, and it's starting to decline, okay? And everything that I've talked about in this news channel, shale oil is the reason why oil prices have been low, because we went from a 9 million barrel a day output back in the 70s, and we declined down to 5 million barrels a day in 2008. So that decline in U.S. oil output was telling the world, listen, all the easy to get to oil is gone, and we have to rely more on the Middle East. And that's why when there's a bomb drop in the Middle East, that's why oil prices go up substantially. Well, shale came on the scene. From 2012 to 2019, we grew from 5 million barrels a day to 13 million. Okay, we added like 8 million barrels a day in 8 years, very short period of time. Nobody expected that because we had such a slow decline from 1970 to 2008. All of a sudden, we went to 13 million barrel a day, outproducing our all-time high. So that reduced the power of geopolitics of war in the Middle East, and it stripped the power of OPEC, which is why OPEC flooded the markets with oil during the time of COVID, when demand crashed due to COVID. Nobody was flying, nobody was driving, oil prices crashed, and then Russia and Saudi Arabia flooded the market with cheap oil. They not only turned up the taps, they also took their reserves and sold those as well, just to cause the price of a barrel of crude to crash. It's no different than what Biden was trying to do with the strategic petroleum reserve that should be saved for security measures in the face of tragic events. He did it to play the markets, in other words. And so the Saudi Arabia and Russia did that to break the backs of shale, and over 75 shale companies went out of business during that time because of that, okay? And so you have to understand that because of shale oil, the instability, the volatility of oil was reduced substantially, okay? So moving forward, shale doesn't have that strength anymore because, number one, our demand is outstripping the excess oil. During the time of peak oil output of shale, our demand was about 90 million barrels a day. Today, it's 104 million, and it's looking to grow to 107 very shortly, okay? Now, look at oil prices set for a strong week gain as Middle East conflict escalates. That news is all over the place, okay? And that has, what really has taken place is that fundamentally oil prices should be much higher, but you got to understand something. The markets dictate the price of oil, okay? The New York Stock Exchange and the Intercontinental Exchange control 80% of the price of oil. 80% of the barrels sold today is priced from the stock exchange, okay? Now, if you have a company, okay, because the stock market's just information. It's not a real product. It's data on a screen in a computer, okay? Imagine you have a company, okay, and your company produces sprockets, okay? And then imagine another company, and they produce sprockets. Now imagine both of your companies sell the same amount of sprockets for the same price, and so you have the same profitability. You are cookie cutter the exact same. But one of you is on the stock market. Which company is worth more? Okay. Well, the one on the stock market. Why? What does the stock market do? It's just information. Okay. Well, people are buying your stock. They're buying and selling and they're trading. Okay. It's it's a paper company at that point. Now imagine that same example, but one company sells half the amount of sprockets, but they are on a stock. That company is going to be worth 3 times more than the company that is making a higher profit. So the stock market is just information. It's rumors. It's news, okay, and information. And so the fundamental picture of oil gets distorted from the left, from the Energy Information Administration, the ones that are pushing the propaganda and the agenda that oil is the cigarette, it's not needed, green energy is going to replace it. All of the propaganda, okay, which the Middle East, which many people are just tired of listening to because it's not even true. We need oil, okay? But all that information is putting a huge wet blanket on the fundamental picture of oil. The truth is that the demand in non-OECD countries is going to grow substantially. And so what this Middle Eastern war, this geopolitical war between Israel and Iran has removed the wet blanket. That's all that's happened. Fundamentally, oil prices should be here, but it shook the wet blanket off. And so now the news about oil prices setting a strong weekly gain and news like that, and the fundamental picture is starting to come to the surface, okay? Just like America's industrialization in the early 20th century, which led to a 30-fold increase in oil demand from 1910 to 1970, today's non-OECD countries with over 6 billion people are experiencing a rapid industrialization as they build factories, infrastructure, and transportation systems. Their need for oil will skyrocket, just like the U.S. during its boom. With a much larger population base, rising middle-class consumption, and expanding industries, these countries are set to drive massive oil demand growth, far surpassing what the U.S. saw during its industrial era. So the thing you have to understand is that from 1910 to 1970, we increased our oil demand in America 30-fold because of the industrial age. These other OECD countries, we represented like 300 million people. They represent 6 billion, and they are starting to go through their industrial revolution. It's starting. This is exactly why you have these Americans, and I love my country. I love America. I love my country. When I see the flag, I respect it. I respect my country. My dad served as a Navy captain for years, and we traveled the world because of his position. I respect men in uniform. I respect my country, and I respect my president. I don't respect all his politics, but I respect him. If I saw him, I would show respect, okay? But what America is doing to these other countries by lecturing them about oil is not for their benefit, but it is because if they grow at the rate that America did during the 1910s to 1970, there is not going to be enough oil for the entire world. And if their demand increases, oil prices will increase, and America will cease to be a superpower. Our debts are great, and they're growing. I think every 100 days it's increasing $1 trillion, if I remember correctly. We're at a $35 trillion deficit, and our GDP accounts for $25 trillion. You at that kind of debt, with the growth, the cost of interest, there's absolutely no way we could survive it. Oil has to be low in order for us to make it. And so that's why you have people in our cabinet that's begging Netanyahu, do not attack Iran. Do not attack Iranian oil facilities. They're not worried about escalation. They're worried about going bankrupt, okay? And so our country can't afford for Netanyahu to drop bombs on Iranian oil for that reason, okay? And so Shale, that's why they are so interested in news about Shale, because we need it. Let's read a few more things here. So the impact as non-OECD countries continue to industrialize, they require more energy to power factories, machinery, and transport goods. Countries like China, India, and Vietnam are experiencing a major industrial expansion, and oil is essential for these industries, particularly in sectors like manufacturing, construction, and logistics. Heavy industries, manufacturing, export-driven industries that rely on oil for energy transportation. Okay, and there's surging vehicle ownership in these non-OECD countries. Rising incomes in countries like India, Indonesia, and Nigeria are leading to a surge in car ownership. Millions of new consumers are entering the middle class, buying cars and motorcycles, significantly increasing gasoline and diesel consumption. This trend is particularly strong in Asia, where car ownership is growing rapidly, but infrastructure for electric vehicles is still underdeveloped, okay? So the key regions is Asia, Africa, Latin America are seeing the largest increases in vehicle ownership, directly driving up oil demand for transportation fuels. Now, you're not going to hear this from the Western media, okay? Because their goal is to keep a wet blanket on the news about oil, because news drives oil prices up. Let's talk about population growth. The impact on non-OECD countries represent the vast majority of global population growth, with countries like Nigeria, India, and Ethiopia driving this expansion. A larger population means greater demand for energy in all forms, including oil, for transportation, industrial needs, and everyday consumption. Non-OECD countries are expected to add over 1.5 billion people by 2050, driving energy demand across sectors from household energy use to transportation and industry. Okay, urbanization and infrastructure expansion. The rapid urbanization occurring in non-OECD countries is fueling the construction of new cities, roads, airports, and infrastructure projects. Oil is needed to power the machinery used in construction and to transport materials. Moreover, as people move to cities, their energy consumption tends to increase, including for transportation and goods. Examples, countries like India, Vietnam, and many African nations are investing heavily in infrastructure, and this requires vast amounts of energy, particularly oil for construction, logistics, and transportation. Growing middle-class consumption. As millions of people in non-OECD countries move into the middle class, their lifestyles change, leading to greater demand for oil-based products. This includes more vehicles, increased travel, and higher consumption of consumer goods like plastics and electronics that are made using oil. Rising disposable incomes will fuel consumption in areas like transportation, energy, and consumer goods. Products like electronics, appliances, and even often rely on oil-based materials like plastics, which are heavily consumed in middle-class households, okay? There's the petrochemical industry growth. The petrochemical industry, which uses oil and gas as feedstock to produce products like plastics, fertilizers, and chemicals, is expanding rapidly in non-OECD countries, especially in Asia and the Middle East. As these countries develop their industrial base, the demand for petrochemicals grows, leading to increased oil consumptions. Countries like China, India, and Saudi Arabia are heavily investing in their petrochemical industries, which directly boost oil demand for both feedstocks and energy. In many developing economies, oil is still used for power generation, particularly in countries that lack access to cheap or reliable alternative energy sources. This is especially true for countries with underdeveloped electricity grids or those reliant on oil-fired generators for electricity in remote areas. Okay, the thing you have to understand, and there's many other points to everything I'm saying here, but the thing you have to understand, America consumes over 20 million barrels of oil a day, and we're only 300 plus million people. The non-OECD countries have yet to experience the expansion that America has, and they represent 6 billion people, okay? If I did a quick calculation here, okay, all right, if I took 20 million barrels of oil, okay, and I divided that by 300 million people, okay, that's 0.0666, okay? If I multiply that times 6 billion, that's 400 million. If the 6 billion and the OECD countries grow at the rate that America did, the demand just for OECD countries would be 400 million barrels a day, totaling 500 million barrels of oil a day consumption. Okay. Now, do I think that they're ever going to use as much oil as America? I strongly doubt it. Okay. But could they increase to 10% of that? Okay. That would mean that oil demand would increase by 40 million barrels a day. Okay. Right now we're consuming about 104 million barrels a day. Okay. A 10% of that would be an additional 40 million, and our demand would be at 144 million barrels a day. Now, Sean, I seriously doubt that can happen. Okay, let's look at 1% of what I mentioned. Okay, that would be an additional 4 million barrels a day. Our demand would be at 108 million barrels a day, while shale's on the decline and cheap, abundant energy is on the decline. The easy to get to oil is on the decline. I seriously doubt that we're going to have another shale revolution. Who's going to do that? The shale revolution was absolutely, it's impossible. It's like trying to make another Mike Tyson or Michael Jordan at their primes. It was the perfect situation, the perfect genetics, the perfect training, the perfect team. It was the perfect season for their time, the Troy Aikman of football. And so the shale revolution wasn't, if that same formation was in any other country, in Africa, in Russia, in Saudi Arabia, you would have never seen the growth. It was the power of America, the American dollar, our ability to print, combined with the ingenuity of the smartest people in the world, because we have the smartest scientists, the smartest engineers in the world, because everybody wants to live that American dream, combined with oil companies, allowed us to add 8 million barrels of oil output in 8 years in a subpar formation. You can't, listen, shale is not made to produce indefinitely. It's the most expensive barrel of oil to produce. We don't have the facilities, enough of the facilities to even refine. The raw product of crude has to be refined in order to make jet fuel and gasoline for your car and diesel for your trucks to utilize. It has to be refined. We don't have the refineries to even refine shale. It's a different kind of oil. It's not crude oil. It's shale, okay? And shale is the most tightest formation. Your kitchen sink sponge is like 90% porosity, where a conventional sandstone, what we normally would be producing oil from, is like 6% porosity, where shale is like 1 to 2% porosity. That's why it needs a massive frac. We were never intended to produce oil from shale. The only reason why we're producing a massive amount of shale oil is because our ability to spend billions of dollars. If we didn't have the cash and it's purely based upon economics, okay, if I invested $1 million in here and I get $1 million back and continue to get oil revenue, hey, that's a great investment. Let's do that over and over again. Imagine if you had a credit card with an unlimited amount of money. It wouldn't matter what the return was. You just keep swiping that card with hopes that it'll make the money. Well, the banks lost their butts. They got killed. That's why 75 companies went out of business. They couldn't pay back their debts. And who ended up losing? The banks. So the banks aren't going to continue to finance that. And people are saying, oh, if so-and-so gets into office, and I'm not going to say his name, if so-and-so gets into office, oil prices are going to drop. Okay, that may be the case because of, like I said before, news predicates the price, okay, the stock price. Yes, you're probably right. Oil prices would dip, but in the long run, they will come back. Why would the banks finance shale oil and gas, especially since they got the easy to get to oil? It was cheaper to develop during the time that they lost their butts. They financially were impacted and hurt. They did not make a profit. Fast forward to today, it is less economical to invest in shale oil and gas for multiple reasons. Number one, it's in less favorable assets. All the easy to get to oil has been accessed. Number two, it's just more expensive to develop thanks to inflation. So the banks lost their butts. I involved myself in conventional oil projects because the projects that were profitable when oil hit $40 for the first time in 2004 are very profitable today because we could, a shale well might cost $20 million where a conventional oil well might cost $200,000. Very profitable to develop in shale, but in conventional oil, sandstone oil wells. But the problem is there's very few of those projects available in comparison to the vast shale plays, okay? So if you're a company like Chevron or British Petroleum that has billions of dollars to spend, you're not going to waste your time with small little $5 to $20 million oil deals when you want to drill $120 million oil wells, okay? You just got a much larger appetite. It's like a 500-pound guy full of muscle trying to eat ants. I mean, it'd just be very tiresome. He needs to eat something much higher protein, okay? And so I'm telling you right now, Netanyahu is going to retaliate to Iran. They're going to send them back to the Stone Age. And I, from what I hear from a few sources, that there are things happening behind the scenes, deep down, the whatever you want to call them, deep state. They want to take out Iran. And so there's many people that want to take out Iran. I truly believe that it would behoove the current administration in America to wait till after the elections to do whatever they want to do to Iran. And I truly believe that's why they're pushing for Iran, and that's why they're pushing for Netanyahu not to escalate this thing. Netanyahu doesn't want to make the mistake of not doing anything now, because right now he has the green light. He has justification to retaliate to these guys, and this is the time to do it. There's a tremendous amount of news and information going around, making it clear that it's imminent that Netanyahu is going to attack. I truly believe that we're going to see $100 oil again, even if geopolitics doesn't push oil prices up. If oil prices come down, it's setting the stage for higher oil prices in the future, because it reduces the amount of capital being invested in oil, okay? So from a geopolitical perspective, from a fundamental perspective, from a growth perspective of non-OECD countries, and you got to think globally. I think that with the decline of America, you're going to see a decline in real estate. You're going to see a decline in the stock market. You're going to see the decline in the U.S. dollar, in American business. You're going to start seeing a decline. But think about the countries that became very wealthy by providing resources for the West when America was growing. The ones that provided resources for America became very abundant, very wealthy. That's why Saudi Arabia, that's why Dubai has the most beautiful buildings and the most beautiful infrastructure, because they were selling oil to America. And so those that invest in oil today are the new Saudi princes of the world, because oil is who's going to provide that oil for non-OECD countries, okay? Those that are producing oil. All right, guys, I'm Sean Pruitt, president of Kingdom Exploration. If you like this channel, please subscribe. Please share this with friends, colleagues, or family, because the algorithms do not like oil. They are anti-oil, and every algorithm is fighting against spreading information about oil demand increasing, about the truth about oil. And if you talk anything negative about green energy, you are shadow banned, and the algorithms just don't like it. All right, guys, if anything interesting happens, please comment below. I'd love to hear your perspective. All right, guys, thanks.